Welcome to Pattern and Craft. I'm Courtney, and in today's video, I want to show you a knitting cast on that you might not have seen before because it is usually used in crochet. This is a Tunisian crochet cast on that I've adapted to be able to be used for knitting. You can see here I have a sample of a scarf that I'm creating right now that is garter stitch with slip stitch detailing and a slip stitch edge. And it utilizes the Tunisian crochet cast on, but I've adapted it for knitting, and it gives a similar effect to these columns of slip stitches and the slip stitch edge by having this sort of braided effect, or what looks like knit stitches going horizontally on the front of the cast on, and then on the back of the cast on it looks a lot like purl stitches, or like garter stitches actually. So it's actually really perfect for this pattern, which is garter stitch mixed with slip stitches, but it could be used for other projects as well. And it is not a stretchy cast on, so I wouldn't recommend it for the top of socks or a neckline that needs to stretch, but it could be good for, say, a top worked bottom up, or for a scarf like this where you want the structure of your knitting to kind of hold its shape. Has a little bit of give, but it's not stretchy by any means, but it's also not tight. Now you do want to be mindful of what size crochet hook you start with, because we use a crochet hook to create a crochet chain, and then we're going to switch to our knitting needle to pick up stitches in the crochet chain. And I find that a crochet hook that is about 1 millimeter larger than our knitting needle is about the right size to use, so that you get a crochet chain that matches the gauge of your knitting. But of course, always create a sample and try out a few different sizes to see what matches your particular yarn size and gauge. Today I'm going to be using a 5.5 millimeter crochet hook and a 4.5 millimeter knitting needle. And I'm going to use this yarn since it might be a little easier to see on camera. I'm going to start my crochet chain by creating a slip knot. I know everyone kind of makes their slip knots a little differently, but make yours however you like. And then place that slip knot on your hook and tighten it. Don't tighten it too tight. You want it to still be able to move around, but just make it to the size of your crochet hook. And now we're going to chain. And we want to chain one fewer chains than the amount of stitches we want to cast on. So say you want to cast on 50, you want to chain 49. Say you want to cast on 12, you want to chain 11. Because the loop on our hook does count as one stitch, so we want to create a chain of one less stitch than we need casted on. So I'm going to go with 12 stitches for my sample for the video, so I'll chain 11. Now to create our yarn over to create our chain, we are going to yarn over in the crochet method, which is back to front from the top to the bottom, which is different from what we usually do for knitting, which is coming from the bottom to the top and over. So we don't want to yarn over like we do for knitting. We want to yarn over how most do for crochet, which is top to bottom. And then we're going to pull this yarn over through the loop on our hook like that. And that creates a chain. Now we do the same motion. We yarn over and pull that new yarn over through the loop on our hook. And that creates a second chain. So we're just going to keep going like that and count as we go. So I have 2 so far. Now I want 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And if you lose count, you can go and check your chain, and you would count the V shapes of the chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. The loop on our hook does not count as one of our chains. So now we are going to switch to our knitting needle. So just take our crochet hook out of that loop and put our knitting needle through it. And now I want to turn to the back of the chain. So this is the front of the chain that looks sort of like knit stitches, looks sort of like a braid. And we want to be working into the back bumps of this chain, these bumps along the center of the back of our crochet chain. That's where we're going to insert our needle and pick up stitches. And we're going to go ahead and insert our needle into the very first bump that we see. It can be a little hard to see because of this working yarn, so pull that up and you can see that there is a bump right here. So if you get confused, just go to a few bumps down and track them up, and you can see that this is the first bump on the back of the chain. So we're gonna put our working yarn sort of up out of the way, and then we're going to insert our needle into this bump here from bottom to top. Now we are going to yarn over the way we would traditionally for knitting from bottom to top. And we're going to pull that yarn over through, whoops, or if you're having trouble like I am, you can reinsert your hook into that loop and you can use your crochet hook to get through this bump. Come on. The first one's always hard. And then you can pull up your loop through the back bump. I would yarn over the way you would for knitting from bottom to top. Pull that loop through and there you go. Now you have 2 stitches. We can switch back to the knitting needle. Now it's a little bit easier. For some reason that first bump's really hard, and from now on it's pretty easy. So we're going to insert through the back bump, sort of from the bottom of the chain to the top. Yarn over in the knitting method and pull through the bump, and you have another stitch on your needle. So we have 3 now, and just keep going along through the back bump, yarning over and pulling up that stitch through the bump. Again, through the bump, yarn over, pull it through to cast on. It's just like picking up stitches for knitting. We're just picking up our stitches in the back bump of our crochet chain. So just keep on going through and doing that over and over. You could yarn over the way you do for crochet and pick up the stitch, but then it will be a twisted stitch. So you're going to have to remember, if you find it's easier to yarn over top to bottom and pull that through, it is a little easier, but then you're going to have to come through and either knit through the back loop for your first row, or you're going to have to remember to untwist your stitches. So I'd rather just do what's a little bit more difficult and make sure my stitches are all untwisted by yarning over from bottom to top, but it is a little harder to get those stitches up. So do whatever it is that works best for you. Okay, here's my last bump, picking up my last stitch, pulling it through, and now we have all of our stitches on the needle, and you can see this really beautiful braid that we have here. Now I would knit a wrong side row first if you want this braid to show up on your front of your work. So when we turn our needle to work into it, you can see this is the back of the cast on, which looks like purl stitches or like a garter row. That is what we see first when we first turn our cast on to start knitting with. So if I'm knitting with a stitch like stockinette that needs to have a front and a back, I would recommend purling first and then doing a right side row as your second row. If you're working garter stitch, it doesn't really matter. You can just do knit stitches on both sides, of course, because that's how you create flat garter. And you're really ready to go at this point. You have your cast on and you can work your pattern, whatever it is. I'm gonna just start with some purl stitches. So we're gonna purl across just as if we had any other cast on, just work into that. And I do like it because it is a pretty sturdy cast on. You're not having to worry about accidentally stretching it out. Those stitches are pretty well affixed in there. And it feels very substantial and like it's not going anywhere, and it's not gonna stretch out if your tension is a little bit strong or anything, like it might with a long tail or with a backward loop cast on. There we go. So now I'm gonna work some knit stitches on the front. Okay, so I've gone ahead and just created a few more rows of the stockinette just for a little swatch so you can see how that cast on looks with the stockinette. It just kind of comes straight out of the braid. It does curl a little bit with the stockinette, so do be careful and do block your work. And here again is how it looks with a garter stitch. I do think it matches really well with the design details of this scarf, so it just depends what your project is, but it's always good to have more tools in the toolbox as far as different cast on options. And I hope you liked learning how to create the Tunisian crochet cast on with a modification for knitting, where we're picking up the stitches onto our knitting needle instead of onto a Tunisian crochet hook. And you don't need a Tunisian crochet hook to create that chain. You can just use a regular crochet hook. Tunisian crochet hooks, by the way, look like this. So they have the same width all the way down, and you can attach a cord here. That's why you can cast on a lot of stitches. Tunisian crochet is really interesting. I do encourage all crocheters and knitters to try it out. It's sort of a cool combination of crochet and knitting. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so that you get notified when more videos go up. I post crochet and knitting tutorials as well as other fiber craft related videos and occasional podcasts. Also follow me on Instagram at Pattern and Craft, and don't forget to tag me if you create something using one of my tutorial videos. All right, I'll see you next time, and happy crafting!